And you'll see in the upper right that you can also comment on it. So it allows an instructor or a set of collaborators or a set of peers in the way that we use it, well, there we go, to actually offer comments and to reflect on it so that you can develop your Canvas as a team and come back to it. Thanks to the students that we've had using it, benefiting from it, we'll soon be posting it in 12 languages, crowdsourced by all the people who have been using it from around the world in the courses Nora will tell you about. It essentially adopts the framework very much of a design thinking approach and uses the kind of general categories that you would get at Parsons or at the B School or places like that, but adds under it a set of questions that really get you to try to think about collaborators, institutional partners, political pitfalls, and other things that really go into thinking about a public project rather than a private one. So with that, I think I've probably used my 5 minutes. And the thing my ask of you would be to ask you to take a look at it, let us know how we can improve it, let us know what questions we should be asking and we aren't. Consider using it with your own students. It's free. You want to fork it. The code is on GitHub. You can use it. We can modify it, and we would love to get more people, again, trying to use it and trying to also share their Canvases. You can password protect it and keep it private. You can make it open and shared, but it gives you a nice kind of also archiving history planning of a project. It's not a Gantt chart. But what it does do is hopefully get you to think about your thinking and the evolution of your thinking over the course of doing a public project rather than a private one. Have I forgotten anything?
No, every time someone creates one canvas, there's this unique URL, so you can just ask anyone, do your canvas, send me your URL, and then you can add your own feedback and use this as a tool for teaching. Yes.
GovLabacademy.org.
We have 7 seconds left.
That's amazing.
All right, Jesse, great. And we've got Sarah Williams on deck and Will. Yes.
Who's this? The stuff that's up here. It's good if you do it too. It's good if you do it too. Yours is so much better quality. This is Jesse.
Hello, I'm Jessie Brayton. I'm at Pratt, and I'm going to give sort of a general overview of the programs that we are running in terms of sort of our role as community-based organizations with their civic work that they do. So the Spatial Analysis and Visualization Initiative is very much a GIS-based endeavor. We focus on using maps and data, some visualizations, but really using open data and tools in terms of problem solving for not only students in their research and faculty in their research, but also very much on the ground organizations. So we are kind of an interestingly founded lab. So we're not in any one department. We're actually directly under the provost office, which allows us to be very multidisciplinary. We did that by design so that we don't have to answer to any one department and we can kind of do what we want. But we do have 3 joint founders. So one is the graduate planning program at Pratt. It has a long history of community engagement. If anyone is familiar with that program, we spend a lot of time on the ground. Also the Pratt Center for Community Development, which is my former organization. Again, 40-year history of helping community groups and providing policy input for the city in New York. And then also by the Graduate Communications Design Department, because we feel that if you want to tell a story, you want to be effective in telling that story. The best way to do that is to think about design and what you want to say. So that's as important as any data and analytical work that you do. And all these sort of crossover areas, which you can explore later. So I'm going to focus today on the design programs, GIS design program, and what we do beyond Pratt. So for the GIS design certificate program, we first think about all the typical things you would do. So that is data analysis, really tearing apart data, understanding how it can be representative, what its limitations are. A lot of people don't spend enough time really asking questions of the data and communicating. Of course, spatial thinking and design, or spatial thinking, and all the fundamentals, how to use the actual tools. But what we also focus on as a key component of our certificate program is community work. So we try to always encourage the students to think about real world problems, like not just making a cool map on Twitter or whatever, not just putting one layer on a map, but how do you take open data, use open tools and some proprietary tools to make it a better place, so to speak, but really by working with community organizations. So we try to help our students get placed in internships with community organizations. We're going to get into a little more some of the citizen science side, doing some hardware hacking. We've got some partners lined up for that. And we want to try to incorporate community-based organization projects into the courses. We're new. We just started last year, so we're getting all of this in place. We want to try to hit on all of these, including that community aspect in all the courses that we're running. And I think the way that we've been able to accomplish this so far is by being really thoughtfully directed in the instructors that we bring in. So we're trying to pull in people with sort of the sweet spot of these skills in terms of like who works with data and does design, who does civic hacking and coding. So we're trying to pull in people that have all of these into the courses, and I feel like it gives the students a really nice exposure to the potential of what you can do in the civic tech world by seeing all of these things in combination. It's also a great example of this. And a lot of our instructors come with maybe 3 of these things in one. So we're really excited about the people we have teaching for us. And then thinking about our lab, I think the lab right now is a more exciting place for students to interact with real groups because all the projects that we do are on request from community-based organizations. So in our experience, what we found is that prefabricated tools don't really work so well for the groups. They have very targeted questions about very specific places. Don't follow any political boundaries. He has their own catchment area that they work in. So our students get to work with the groups themselves. We've done stuff for bids, LDCs, groups like 596 Acres, Neighbors Allied for Good Roads. They get a lot of exposure, really understanding the challenges that these groups face in their civic work. So just 2 brief examples. How's my time?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the most interesting things that our students get exposure to in working with these groups is understanding how complex the data landscape is. So this is just one project we did working with the Annenberg Institute from Brown and the Coalition for Educational Justice in New York, trying to essentially make a succinct compilation of educational indicators so that neighborhoods can understand how the schools are faring compared to one another in their districts or school districts, but then also compared to the boroughs and the city overall. So we pulled data from I don't even know how many educational data sets, trying to clean them up, align them, so the students really start to understand the challenges that these groups face and work with it. Is that it? Okay, I have another one, but whatever. Lots of research, lots of data, focusing on maps.
Sarah, is there a buzz over there? Probably yes. Good.
Don't go to see
All right.
My office has that, and it's pretty funny. It's very close.
So what I thought I would do today is, we do a lot of research into civic data design, but actually I wanted to talk about a class that I designed at MIT, which is called Carew-Reid City. And it's really a class to try to teach students civic technology. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it because I think it's a little bit different from some of the types of classes that we usually have. So what we try to do in this class is give students a background in how social media and crowdsourcing are currently being used in urban planning. So we do a lot of literature, theory, do a lot of readings, critiques on how it's being used. And then we gain hands-on experience with civic organizations that might use social media and technology in their planning purposes. So we actually partner with community groups in the class to think about how technology can be used in their organization. We help these organizations use information they collect to advocate for their needs. So we partner with these organizations and design technology for them, and then think about how the data that they collect or gain from that technology interaction can be used to help further their mission. And the students are actually asked to prototype and implement actual media strategies. So they partner with community groups to actually develop a prototype. And so 3 weeks before the end of class,
students actually have to have built their civic tech application for their community organization. They have to implement it, they have to get data back, and they have to actually critique what they've done with their data analytics, how well it worked. This gives them a lot of information about how civic tech works, what are good things, what are bad things. So last year, just to give you an example, we worked with a community organization called Operation Pay Dirt. They have a project where they develop funders and these are dollar bills that kids design, to talk about the cost of lead poisoning in their community. And so Operation Pay Dirt asks, how can we make this a more of a digital experience, something that people can engage with on Facebook? Of course, so my students actually made an app for that. We worked with another organization, which is out of Long Island, Erase Racism, and they wanted a social media game that helps teach about structural racism. That was a really hard one, and actually we were successful at the end, but that was a really hard problem to solve. We also work with participatory budgeting projects to help them crowdsource ideas during the idea generation process for participatory budgeting. We actually had two groups who made very different apps that created solutions for their problems. And then we work with a project that's out of my research lab, which is called Digital Metatus. And so we actually created a civic application which allows people to crowdsource information about the informal transit system in Nairobi. These are kind of small minibuses. I made a map of that, but now Google has paid us to update that map, and so my students were charged with like how can we crowdsource the updating of the map itself. So how do we teach all these things to students that are urban planning students, many of them that have no technology experience, interested in technology, so they're just learning GIS, they might just learn how to make a website. Many of them do not have JavaScript, even though I'm at MIT. Many of the urban planning students come from a very wide range of backgrounds. So we start the class with workshops and theory. So they do kind of theory on civic tech, but we do a series of workshops. So we do a workshop where they all turn their cell phones into a sensor, and they collect data about that, and can make maps from it. We also do a workshop on creating websites and resource centers. So one of the things, it sounds strange, but like there's so many kind of plugins for Drupal and WordPress that do kind of civic engagement, and we kind of actually just do a workshop on how you can implement plugins to do the kinds of engagement strategies that you want, and a lot of students wind up doing something with that. We learn a lot about mapping software, crisis mapping software, crowd mapping software, ways to engage and crowdsource through maps. We use things like UCBD. This year we did workshops with Leaflet as well and ShareAbout. All right, so I'm just gonna go. So we turn computers into text messaging databases. We learn to work with mobile air quality sensors. We do storyboarding and wireframing. And we use cell phones to deliver and tell stories. So those are all the kinds of workshops they get. It will be 1 minute over. And we use App Inventor, which is a block-based coding language that comes out of MIT, and people learn how to make apps on their cell phones. So this year, they made an app in the App Inventor, which is called Umadi. None of these students know how to code or do anything before it. I was really excited. They actually were able to create an app where they record the bus trip, people collect tokens for getting more data about the Matatu maps, and then they can rate their ride. And I'm just gonna kind of skip through this since I'm over time, but this is how the app works, and it's developed in this App Inventor, which is a kind of block coding language similar to Scratch. And they had to actually implement it and kind of find out problems within the application itself. So if you have any questions, I'll be there to answer them later. Thanks.
Will,
So I was unfortunately at a community board meeting really late last night, so I didn't get a chance to put the slides together, so I'll try to be extra entertaining. So as I said earlier, I work for the Manhattan Borough President. For those who don't know, the Manhattan Borough President is essentially, there's 5 borough presidents, 5 boroughs in New York, obviously. So essentially the borough president has mostly an advisory role on virtually everything that happens in the borough. Budget allocations, the borough president actually has lots of funding that can be allocated for capital funding. Land use, every big zoning project that requires anything that goes through the land use section of the zoning code has to go through the borough president's office for review first. And then one thing I really want to talk about is the borough president is responsible for appointing the majority of the city's community board members and overseeing how those community boards actually operate. So again, for those who don't know, every neighborhood in Manhattan and the entire city is part of a community board. There are 59 community boards in the city of New York, 12 in Manhattan, and essentially they are what they call neighborhood city halls. So I think it's important when we talk about civic technology, I think that it's not just technology, it's also civics. So I think it's really important for people who are working in this space to understand sort of how cities actually operate. It's really interesting every time we go to sort of a tech conference and we hear about amazing programs like Presidential Innovation Fellows, PMF, and oftentimes we hear is people go into these spaces with amazing sort of technical backgrounds that don't know very much about bureaucracies or sort of how government works. So I think that's something that I think is the role that universities can play, is even when you're teaching a computer science course, if your aim is sort of how can you solve public problems, you need to understand public institutions. So that's something hopefully we can talk a little bit more about. But essentially, as overseeing the community boards, what our goal is to take these institutions that are basically 50 volunteers with usually 2, sometimes 3 staff, who again have a role to play in deciding how neighborhoods are built, whether a bar is going to get a liquor license, whether a building is going to get upzoned so that it can be larger, or we're going to build what sort of our mix is going to be affordable housing. These are really important decisions that affect people on a very real level, but oftentimes decisions are made on a very antiquated ad hoc methodology of I come in, I complain about something, no one really knows how to analyze how big the deal that is, and people yell and scream for a meeting for 4 hours. It's really an archaic way of doing business. So what we like to do is incorporate the sort of benefits of technology to both take in more information from people and make better decisions based on what's actually happening on the ground. So what we decided to do is we want to figure out, okay, how can we use city open data? Again, as I said earlier, the city has an open data law that has tons of information about everything from, I guess I said, land use, school location, education outcomes, etc. How can we take all that information and turn it into something tangible that helps decisions get made at the local level? So we know we wanted to work with community boards, given our role of appointing them and sort of having oversight of their operations. We said, okay, how can we take these community boards, these 50 volunteers who often have great, expertise in local issues, but maybe not so much about analyzing data or using technology to make their decisions. So what we decided to do is start a program with CUNY, the City University of New York, through their program called the Community Service Corps. So what we did is we placed data interns in all 12 of Manhattan's community boards to start doing basic analytics for them, to start getting community boards to think about how can we use data, how can we start thinking this data visualization analysis methodology to start making our decisions based on facts, not just anecdotes. And the program was, it was a bit of a rough go our first year around, I'll be honest. I'd love to talk more about sort of what went wrong, what didn't. But essentially we were able to start getting boards to start thinking that, okay, now we're making decisions, we should be looking at data, not just, just coming in off the street. Round 2 of that program is going to be starting this fall, and working with Nolan Beta NYC to really professionalize that curriculum, make sure we're teaching students sort of the real basics of what they need to know, both again on the technology side, using Socrates, using productivity, et cetera, but also how the community boards work, how to interact with personalities, how to understand the different committee structure, et cetera. So we're really excited about that and what that could mean for really professionalizing community boards. And again, I think the main thing we want to do is move from the publication of open data to the use of open data. And for us, the best way to do that is working with the community institutions that already exist. Really community boards. So I'm happy to talk more about that and look forward to learning more from all of you.
I want to add one caveat to that. This is more geared towards the non-New York City folks in the room. We have in New York City, I think, 2 not-so-secret weapons within New York City government, and one of them is Gail Brewer, who who's just been a tireless advocate for civic technology here. The other will likely come to lunch today for a quick inspirational chat. And that's Ben Kaler's, sort of the rising star within New York City Council. He's also a former coder and working hard to sort of open up the law too.
Yeah, and actually, one last thing I'll add on that note is if people are already using city data in their daily operations and have problems with it, I've already heard from a few people with problems with certain data sets. Agencies are coming to them, complaining about issues with government. Please tell me about that. Again, we have a soapbox we can scream from, and we're happy to do it. So feel free to complain to me, and I'll do it.
Thank you. Next up, we got Ben Valentin, and on deck is just me. You got slides, right? Huh? You got slides, right? Yeah.
Just me's not great.
Okay, well, we can. Yeah, you too.
All right. As I said, I'm Ben Wellington. Actually, my wife was a Brooklyn Law / Pratt student, so she graduated Lee Wellington or Leslie Wellington in 2013. That's how I got into all this stuff. We got married. I got into urban planning. She took a stats class at Pratt and would come home every day and say, "Why do I have to learn stats? You know, I don't like this." And I said, "Well, this is silly. We're in this world with all this data, and we're teaching students stats out of a textbook." I said, "This doesn't make any sense. Nobody wants to learn about fake information." So I went to Pratt and I pitched a new crime statistics course where we use New York City public data about urban planning to make stats fun, because stats is inherently not fun. I made it a little more fun. I don't know if I made it fun. And this was, of course, made possible because, as was referenced, the open data laws a few years back. At the time, if you look at what Bloomberg said, I won't read the whole thing, but he said he's trying to catalyze the creativity and like the enterprising spirit of computer programmers. And, you know, we've had these big apps competition in New York, but I always thought this was kind of misguided. Because to me, it wasn't about computer programmers, it was much bigger. And that's what I'm trying to teach students at Pratt. These students are not computer programmers. Open data is about, you know, all of us using the data, not computer programmers. So this always bothered me. So while I think the city historically has seen open data through programmers to apps, I see it like open data to policymakers, nonprofits, urban planners, bloggers, anyone you name it, to really make a difference. And that's what I'm trying to impart. And that's what so many of you have actually referenced already today. So some examples of some of the stuff I'm doing in class. This is the physical inspection scores of public housing units around the country, average. This is made in a pivot table in Excel. You don't have to be a programmer. Those are kind of this intro to data science. And I just, you know, the students analyze it and look at the last score there. Puerto Rico, DC, Guam, and Virgin Islands, the lowest scores out of the whole country. What do those four have in common about representation in federal government? Kind of interesting, but we'll move on. This is the average salary of urban planners in New York City government, which is public data. The students can see that for every year you work in New York City government, the average person got paid $500 more, which is public data and stuff that they're actually kind of interested in. So they want to do linear regression. This is what their students are writing. The average starting salary for a city planner is around $60,000. Each additional year the city planner works is estimated to increase by $500. So I say, okay, if you work 10 years, what would your salary be? And it comes to $65,000, according to this public data. So they're learning to use real data and things that they really, really care about. These are rodent complaints from 311 around Atlantic Yards, the Barclays Center. And we're talking about construction and whether it changed anything. You can see the rodents and dirty conditions kind of skyrocketing during construction, starting to tell the stories using data. They look at data sets like this and go, there's so many rows and columns. But with a little bit of pivot tables and Excel, you can do things like this. This is someone who's in the second day of class, the homework, took this data set, which had 50,000 rows, and made this chart about the types of accidents happening in there around Pratt. 1% were from passenger vehicles, 1% were sports, zero programming experience, but we're really, now they can start to answer questions. We have to tell them, you can use data, you can answer these questions too, you don't have to be a computer person. And that's kind of what I get across. I also teach that, look, we want our data to be public because when universities partner with government and do stuff behind the scenes, we can't verify, that's not science, right? Science has to be repeatable. And a lot of the work we're seeing is all happening through NDAs. So the paper comes out and no one can verify the paper, as opposed to physics where you have to replicate, right? So I teach my students not to work, on things behind the scenes. If you're working in an agency, fine, but if you're working across, we only work with public data. So here's an example of restaurant inspection scores, A, B, and C in New York City. This is the distribution. If you get blue is B's and red is C's, so the more points you have when the inspector comes, the worse. You see a giant fall between the A and the B. That's because the inspectors are not really fairly grading our restaurants here. they're inflating grades. You can see it just by counting. This is not deep science, and you can start to tell stories. When you tell these stories, the government responds, right? When you have an idea, the government doesn't respond. When you have data, the government responds. Department of Health says, when the students do this, and then I put it out on the blog, the inspectors are not instructed to offer leniency, just to cite what they see. The final score is based on the extent of violation the inspector observed. They didn't really say anything useful, but they responded, and we're kind of being made aware of it. And I've shown students that if you do things, silly things, a few of you have seen this. This is fire hydrants in New York by the amount of ticket revenue being generated, parking ticket revenue. So it's the top 200 hydrants, and there were in the Upper East Side, but what was interesting is there were 2 hydrants in the Lower East Side that were making $55,000 a year. And when if you look at them, it turns out there's sort of a blank link between the thing. It was confusing. So the Google Street Map went by and caught a parking ticket on the car. And when you start to point out these things, it's not just an idea anymore. It's data-based approach. The DOT has to respond and say, we've not received any complaints about this location, but we'll review the roadway markings and make any appropriate alterations. And by the way, it's about $500,000 in parking tickets later. They repaint the street. So I'm working with students to show you can make a difference with data. You don't need to be a programmer, and that's what's so important to me. And I'll end just by showing one thing by this program called CityTerm, which is a high school program that comes around New York and they do data. You don't have so much you don't have to program, but this is a student there that I talked to. They took this data, and you don't need to know GIS if you have colored pencils. This is graffiti complaints around New York, and the high school student was starting to get in early on this stuff. And it just shows that people of all abilities, all sizes, with the right questions to ask and inspiration can kind of step up. So that's what I'm working to do at Pratt. Happy to talk more about it then. Thank you.
Ben Valentin, I quantify as the blog.
That is true. There is a blog somewhere.
So hello everyone, as previously mentioned, I'm helping to coordinate the GovLab Academy coaching programs. What are they? Well, they are hands-on, issue-focused learning and mentoring programs here to help teams and individuals that have a civic innovation there. Here to help teams and individuals working in civic engagement, civic innovation, develop effective projects from idea to implementation. We do so by customizing learning materials depending on the participant. Each coaching program has their own syllabus and it's all based on what projects are participating. We also foster the peer-to-peer support. Since we're gathering in the same group people who are passionate and working on the same things. And we are also connecting them with the leading experts on the field. Up to now, we have a very diverse range of projects that have participated with us, from intelligence, with a mobile app that's making recycling more convenient for citizens in New York City. They are going to launch officially this week, Thursday, on our office to also help design the NASA their data analytics lab. We've received more than 70 projects across 10 different coaching programs. Projects are from all over the world. Each point is someone trying to make a difference. They come from more than 20 countries, more than 60 cities, across all sectors, non-profits, government, academia, entrepreneurs. So far, we've offered coaching programs on citizen science, civic tech for local legislators, freedom of information, tech procurement, data design, data analytics, humanitarian innovation, crowdsourcing, open contracting, citizen engagement. All our faculty comes also from academia, but also from practitioners. We have Brian Ford from the MIT Media Lab. We have Carew-Reid from Harvard Business School, that's helping also with crowdsourcing and data design. We have Geoff Morgan. We have Miriam Lisbeth for the freedom of information, François Gray for the citizen science. And all of them have been a great experience. All of them meet fully online. through an application called Zoom. Here you can see Councilman Ben Carlos. He was leading together with our CDO, Arnold Sahuet, the City Tech for Local Legislature Coaching Program. It's great. Everyone can share screen. More than 25 participants can connect at the same time. We have a chat. People can also send private messages. They can also send links or questions throughout the group or just interrupt. They can also virtually raise their hand. They go on for 4 weeks, every week, or for 8 weeks, every other week. All of them have this methodology. Implementation is the guiding elements in all of the online sessions, but we try to first rethink with them about their problem definition, their project description. The second session is about their strategy to engaging people and data. The third session is about also creating how are they going to measure their impact. And finally, the fourth session is about the storytelling, the story behind their project, the demo day. What's our secret recipe? I think is that all of our participants are passion and project driven. They're going to do it anyways. They're going to work on this. What we're creating is this new space where people who are working on the same things across all the world, they just get to meet and they just, I don't know, for example, this is Clay Johnson on tech procurement. He was so excited because he said 10 years ago I was the only one working on tech procurement. Right now I'm working together with you on 5 different projects. They're all very exciting. And I don't know, my leading view of knowing these things arrive is that it's hard to not sustain the smile throughout the 2 hours that each online session lasts, where it's almost all about feedback and all about iteration and all of things also sharing their best practices. And what's next? Well, we are constantly offering new coaching programs, and here I also wanted to invite you if you're interested. We are open to any possibility of collaboration within the university, outside the university. Our students are not affiliated to anything but their passion for their project. And we're coming up next is some coaching program on sensors. How can sensors enhance our environment and public policy? We're also going to have one on open data, another one on data collaboratives, which is we're going to coach corporations on how to share their data for public good. We're also building skill building workshops for our alumni. And finally, we're also trying to create this map of all the projects that have been participating in the coaching program so that they can see who is working the same issue, who is at the same stage of development, who is in my same country or my same city. So we're trying just to create all these tools as a canvas to continue the conversation and continue creating these networks of civic innovators.
Good job. Great slides. Yes. Okay, great. And then let's go back to Renee.
So I have no slides, unfortunately, because I've been traveling for 2 weeks. I didn't realize I would be presenting this morning in lieu of a colleague of mine, Eduardo Sasaki, who's going to be here this afternoon and is the brains of the team. So I will give you some general comments that hopefully will be helpful, specifically about a partnership that we have with Microsoft. But I'm going to start off by giving some background about our approach towards engaged learning at the new school. So I think what's important about the new school, which has been around for about 100 years, is that we've always really focused on a progressive learning approach that is very much steeped in kind of a John Dewey philosophy of learning by doing. So we have for decades really integrated into our pedagogy, working in communities, working on problem-based, project-based pedagogy that's very much focused on critical questions connected to social justice and sustainability, and particularly in an urban context. And when if you look at our vision statement, it's about creativity and social engagement, and our strengths are in design, media technology, social sciences, management, and liberal arts. So I also want to point out that I want to at least recognize that we have an extraordinary faculty in technology, media and technology, and they're actually not in the room today. So I just want to shout out that we have a very, very strong design and technology program at Parsons. Also a strong bench strength in media studies and technology in our media studies program, which is not in Parsons, but about that. And I worked at it, I'm so excited to meet you today. So actually it's a big issue. The silos of universities across, I mean, not just our university, are critical. It's provocation for the story I'm about to tell you. So we have strong programs of degree granting programs in design, technology, and media. And also amazing labs, you know, led by faculty's research interests, including, for example, a new lab called the Humanities Action Lab, which is headed up by Claire Potter, focused on integrating digital uses into learning across the university. The PET Lab headed up by, and I might be missing some names here also, but Colleen Macklin, which is doing a lot of project-based work around the world, humanities, I mean, even disaster assistance and other kinds of partnerships with nonprofits using technology. And then we have many other capabilities at the university that I am not leaving out, and I just want to acknowledge. So one of the initiatives that the provost started last year is called the University Graduate Transdisciplinary Initiative. And it really is an effort to break the silos that we live in universities and to bring and create a graduate education space that is transdisciplinary, that is organized around different labs with different thematics that bring students from across the university into the same learning context. So the provost invited Eduardo Stazowski, who you're going to meet later, to start the first pilot lab that we want to test out this new pedagogy. And he invited me from the management program and another professor, Vinny Srinivas, from the management program too. Eduardo Stazowski is a service designer, and his focus has been in public service innovation. So anyway, I have 1 minute, and the course itself is focused on we work with 4 partners, including Microsoft, also the Office of Personnel Management, the federal government, Time Banks, which is another organization, and the Parks Foundation. So very different organizations. And the question that we're really focusing on is co-creating solutions for citizens. So with Microsoft, the team is really focused on New York City, trying to understand the civic technology space in New York City. And their specific focus is, and I'm going to quote them, we believe that civic tech initiatives must be designed with an emphasis on access, participation, common ownership, and the social, cultural, political context in which it is implemented. However, from our research, these factors over the last semester, and this is a 2-semester course, these factors are rarely found within civic tech initiatives, meaning lack of access and lack of participation. Really, at the community level is the point. And our project is designed to work towards clarifying precisely how and what these factors really look like within a civic tech initiative. So they're going to be focusing in the coming year on a set of projects to really test out how can we integrate stronger citizen participation, not just the university degree students that we are supporting, but real community participation in civic tech, creating the tools and also the empowerment and the ability for communities to use data and to make for their decision making in much the same way that we heard about community boards and empowering them in that way. So I'm going to stop there. We're excited about this new transdisciplinary graduate space. The students who are working on these projects are from design and technology, media studies, management, transdisciplinary design, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an amazing group of students who are working with Microsoft. We look forward to the outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks. We're super excited to be part of this course. And, you know, it's a great deal for us. 2 semesters, so the students really get time to start knowing something. And their grad students coming
all different backgrounds, and they're supposed to build one project, they're gonna build 2 projects, so they can see in parallel what it's like to design something as you wish, like a dream car, and what it's like to design something co-designed with the community. And see what the different efficiencies and challenges are of each process along the way. It's gonna be fun. Jesse, you wanna?
Okay, so I want to talk about how to do kind of the nuts and bolts of some of these co-design or co-design in projects actually, and that's kind of when working with undergrads, I want to talk about that specifically since most of these kind of best case scenarios are often graduate students, and also just kind of contingency plans that develop when we inevitably kind of start to fail at doing all of the great co-design work that we want to in the classroom too. And so I do want to talk about basically pitched at the undergrad level because so many great kind of seen successes at the grad level, and I especially all the stuff that I'm talking about has been kind of my observation from teaching at the undergrad level, working with grad students, co-design work, and also observing a class at MIT and kind of helping assess that class for how to do this work better also. And so basically, what I'm going to talk about is kind of a more pedagogical version of what GovLab or what Beth was talking about with how to put this stuff in an easy to access and kind of form situation, but a more pedagogical approach to that. And so I do just want to, and so some of this is redundant to what we heard, which probably means it is in fact best practices. But so some stuff is really great to do with grad students in particular. One thing that we found to be super beneficial is this 2-part course model. And so it was interesting to hear Sarah say that in her one course that they actually had to design and prototype this thing. The way that we had found this to be productive was to actually build and implement a separate course. But that was really helpful, but that's something that you just really can't do at the undergrad level for a variety of reasons, right? They don't have the time, that the infrastructure is there for them to teach 2 classes in a row, and that's a great way to fund actual projects too, but that's not really a thing that we can do with undergrads. And so also just to this is like basic for this group, this is kind of pitched maybe at other people we might tell and try to teach how to do this. But it's great to connect directly with about 2 to 3 community partners, maybe 1 for one class, have them build out projects, bring the partners in. But at an undergrad level, this often isn't really feasible, especially because the culture of doing community-based work in an undergrad environment is about volunteerism. It's about getting people, sending them out to teach ESL, right, work at a soup kitchen. And so to try and find workarounds around that culture of volunteerism and try to embed co-design projects is the thing that I've been trying to do with my undergrads, and that's really kind of where it's important to have good community partners. It's important to have great workshops like we heard from Matt and Sarah, but especially I think as educators, it becomes even more important if we can't rely on those things to basically rely on our own assignments and how we structure this. And so that's kind of what I just wanted to talk about, basically is workaround in terms of assignments. And so basically we've developed, and this is kind of in collaboration with some partners in Boston, about 5 to 6 assignments throughout the semester that lead up to an end design book, basically. And then dividing them up in this particular way, because even with the best kind of professors, the best community partners, we found that when these assignments are not there, things go awry, right? Projects kind of look insane, community partners think they're way out too far, they can never implement them, there's not enough communication between them, their kind of understanding of the needs of community partners is not adequate, as Beth mentioned earlier also. So basically it starts with this community or organizational needs assessment, and as Beth said, we are very bad at doing that, and we need to teach students to do it better, but community organizations are also terrible at it. We had one community partner who all they would say was they wanted us to build them a website. And like that's not a super helpful thing, and that wasn't going to be engaging at that point. And they needed one, but there was other stuff too. So to figure out how to best do that, to build that into the curriculum, and then to translate those needs into specific goals, right? So what's the difference between mobilizing? Do you want to mobilize people? Do you want to give them information? Do you want to actually solicit their feedback and kind of to turn them into those forms? And to make those 2 separate, but to make those 2 separate things.
And then to do too early prototypes for actually the exact same reason that somebody just mentioned too, right? To do prototypes that the community might want, but also that might be kind of out there and crazy interesting, but that the community partners might not find suitable. And do classroom and critiques with those partners. Sorry, this is going to happen for all of them. And now it's transition. There we go. Okay. It's going to happen for every single one. And so then to refine it, obviously. Okay. That's okay. And then also to bridge this gap between high and low tech options. And that was a thing that we found especially productive for community partners. Somebody mentioned that they wanted, that a partner wanted, I think it was Sarah's class, they wanted a game to like do this kind of really great and kind of big picture thing, right? But that a lot of the times you're finding that community partners can't actually implement these tools because they're too expensive, they're too big, they're too cool, basically, and they don't have the infrastructure to actually help keep them up later on. And so to implement a low-tech version of them, to do proof of concept that would actually also help fund this stuff if you actually can implement it also, but to do a paper prototype version of the game instead of actually trying to develop this or something like that also. And then just lastly here, an assessment plan moving forward too. So how would you assess if these things are actually working with the goals that you kept in mind from number 2? But then also, how would the organization actually assess these things using the stats that they might have at their disposal, any extra analytics and things like that, and that's a way to get undergrads involved in this research too. So I will leave it there. And the last one is combine that into a design hub. So.
You maybe segment slides where they work.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. All of these have like assignments and like lesson plans with them too. And I noticed that one of the goals for the day is to have like a rest of the repository for this stuff. And like I'm happy to share that.
He's got it. Great. Jason. And is Josephine here yet? Oh, great. You want to go out, please? Great. And then looks like we're just getting ready for the results. Yeah. Yes. Just here. Great. So I actually, in the clinic I teach at NYU, I do a lot of advocacy, and I'm always kind of trying to push people to do things. So I'm going to push all of you an idea that I've been working on for a couple of years with some colleagues around patents. Just so I know, how many people here are familiar with open source as a concept or in software? Great, perfect, just making sure. So what's wrong with this picture? If any of you work in transportation or public transportation or civic transportation, you might have heard of this. This is actually one of the most contested patent areas in the United States, which is there is a company called Arrivalstar, which has at least 35 patents on a version of this, predicting when things will show up in public transportation. Transmitting on your phone, on the screen, calling you. Actually, there's a thing where like you'll get a phone call at home telling the bus might show up in a couple of minutes. They patented every version of it they could. And you think, okay, well that's fine, whatever. But it turns out that actually they not only patent things, they sue people like crazy. In fact, one of the artifacts from 2013, the #1 patent plaintiff in America. Probably didn't think they were going to be the most aggressive one, right? I think they are still in 2014, but I don't have the latest stats. And who do they sue? Well, they do sue FedEx and UPS, but they also have sued at least a dozen cities, counties, or other municipal transportation, including the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, and the Metropolitan one here in New York. So that's annoying. What should we do about this, right? Well, there's a lot of defense, and actually some of the patents actually got shut down because there was a group of transportation, led by the federal government, a group of transportation entities that then essentially got a settlement by threatening to take them on. But this was, I think, more of a symptom of a problem that civic tech has not necessarily thought about. What do we do about patents? And especially because so many civic tech entities are open source oriented, right? So here's the hypo, and you can replace open source with civic tech. What if suddenly civic tech and open source patented everything? Like everything, right? And what if we took this patent troll game and actually turned it around and used it for good, right? What if we have tried to actually take the patent system and own it in a sense, right? What might that look like? So this is only a lightning talk. I have a very much longer presentation I can do, but let me give some highlights. So I took a look at Bugzilla, which is a case study. How many people here know what Bugzilla is? You don't have to, don't worry. So Mozilla, which makes Firefox and Thunderbird and a bunch of other open source software, also has a bug database where if you have a problem, you log in with them, and it's also open source software, so any of you can use it. And they track bugs, and when the bugs are fixed in the software, there's a little annotation that says fixed, which is very nice. So I just went back and said, well, okay, so Mozilla is a nonprofit. I mean, it's a corporation that owns a nonprofit. I said, well, what is a patent? Well, patenting is complicated, but at its fundamental core, it's a problem that gets solved in a way that is novel and non-obvious, right? It's not an easy, trivial fix. It's a complicated or more sort of thoughtful fix, but at the same time, it's a fix for a problem. How many problems has Mozilla alone fixed since it started tracking this in 1987? Well, 500,000 problems have been solved by one open source entity. Now, not every one of those is going to be patentable, they're going to be problems, but think about what if only 10% of this were patentable, right? That's 50,000 patents Mozilla might own right now. Just one entity in the open source world, right? So let's think about this in the civic tech world, right? So lots of people talk about Code for America. I just went and grabbed this. I haven't talked to them. But I'm thinking, okay, well, in this one report from 2013, they built 30 apps, they scaled 18, they probably did a million other things. How many of those are patentable, right? Probably a lot. This is actually a client of mine for my clinic. I could give a whole nother talk about software lawyering for NGOs in the civic tech space. It's something we do a lot in my clinic. I think it's a really great experience for the law students and hopefully for the NGOs. NYPL is great to work with. They have this labs unit. They make a lot of stuff. Also, a lot of stuff that I think is patentable. And then, of course, I just grabbed this off the internet as well. You all know this space way better than I do, but it just seemed to me, oh, geez, there's a lot of stuff here that's potentially patentable, right? So what does this mean in terms of pure numbers, right? Well, if you look at who the top companies are in the commercial space, and these again are old numbers, so you have to get the updated ones when they come out. But you look at, so Mozilla might have had 50,000 patents, and by the way, if you look back at the chart, it I think fixed 50,000 bugs in the last year alone. So 10% of that is 5,000. So they might have 5,000 patents if they patented everything. They'd be doing pretty well on this top 10 list. Mozilla alone had 5,000 patents. So if you're interested in this, what we propose is, like Creative Commons, and like the GPL, and like a lot of open source copyright licenses, we propose an open source patent license that legally mandates that the licenses, that the patented inventions be for good or for open. And I can talk about how that might work in the civic tech space if you're interested. But imagine if every single project patented what they were working on and then committed themselves legally to a license that shared that openly with every other similarly situated entity. And what would the patent landscape look like then? And who would a rival star be up against at that point? Okay. Just the slide.
Is there anyone else speaking? Have I seen anyone?
I can say some things.
All right, and then Daza last.
You can do those. You can do those. You can do those.
So, hi everyone, my name is Justine Dorado, and I am also at the New School, in some place. Let's have everyone just to, I know I'm one of the last presenters, so let's just kind of shake it out and point to somewhere on your body where there's a scar. Everyone has a scar, right? Point to somewhere, not point to another place where there's a scar. Right? And point to another place where there's a scar. Exactly. Everyone has scars. So the whole idea behind some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about is how we can find our ways to protect projects and initiatives through the body and understanding the body in online space and how to translate the body. So I'm sort of obsessed with this topic. So one of the first projects that I initiated is on online embodiment, and the things that I kind of look at is like, you know, technology is not just a prop, it's our partner. It's not just about us and our laptop and doing that. It's about integrating it into the ways that our body, you know, floats through this sort of virtual space, right? So one of the first projects that I did, I was at Fulbright in Amsterdam, and I came back and I was really inspired by it, and I created a project called Kids Connect, which connects students in different countries through creative collaboration and theatrical performance inside virtual worlds. So one of our pilot projects was between students in New York and in Amsterdam. And so they came into, at the time, it was Teen Second Life, and then we connected also to a live stream, although at the time there wasn't a live stream, you had to do it with your own streaming server. This was back in 2005. But this is a meeting space Second Life for the first time, and we used theatrical improvisation and movement to actually get them to make a story together, which they then performed inside this virtual city that they built themselves. And hybrid virtual city had to have aspects of both their cities and countries. So it had little Dutch houses next to big New York skyscrapers. And why don't we have skyscrapers in Amsterdam? Well, why don't you learn about that city? So it's all about sort of learning while you're being in a creative space together. And it's all about also sort of leveraging the space you're in. So I think if you're going to use a virtual world, also use the affordances that it has. So we look at exploring identity through avatars. So instead of making an avatar that looks like yourself, make an avatar that has a different skin color, that has a different body shape. Be that avatar for an entire day, interact with somebody that doesn't know what you really look like in the physical world, and see how that feels when you're being the other. So just gonna kind of see through here to sort of presentation day. I teach a lot of courses online at the New School, specializing in virtual learning environments and social media matching culture, things that sort of involve like online community. All of it's completely online, so I have open office hours online. I still use movement games and I use the theatrical improv things to do things online, so to give sort of a network collaboration feel to all the classes that are online. One of the things that I'm working with, in fact, with Liv and Jonathan, is a new project called Reactor, which is a mobile news game that encourages activism around news stories. So this is very much still in the formative state. We're working with CUNY interactive journalism classes, as well as Stevens Institute of Technology. So it's totally being developed and worked through different sorts of schools and infrastructures like that. But basically, what the idea is to have different news stories, and we're connected to social action within the hyperlocal community or it could be a local community. But here's a news item, and it's connected to this map where you can choose the different actions, and then each action has assigned points to it. So it's within sort of a game framework, and there's definitely game mechanics to it. This is an example of a leaderboard, but not just a leaderboard, team leaderboard. We can hook into corporate social service initiative. So, for example, places like that have Fortune 500 programs already and matching programs already in place can make can hook into Reactor and play the game so that philanthropy and social actions actually becomes like a team sport in the corporate sphere. Okay. So that's something that's very much being developed in collaboration with a couple different universities. This is the one that I was referring to with the SCAR. This is a project I'm simultaneously working on. That's sort of an arts tech project that we're building within the New School and within refugee communities and communities affected by war. But the idea is that everyone has scars. So Summer Collision is an immersive media installation and online experience that collects people's stories about scars, compares them to science, and it's very much about amplifying those stories through refugee communities, and we're right now working with veterans in New York and in DC. So this is one example of like the concept demo we did, and this, it's not showing up. Anyway, there was a video there. I don't think I have time for it anyway. We'll just talk through it. But basically, we're working. I got another Fulbright to go to a refugee community in Vienna to work with some youth and people in the refugee community there, collecting their stories about scars and working with veterans. And we just applied for a huge grant through the NEH that will be working with students at New School to realize some visions throughout the States.
That's agreed.
Okay.
He's been like furiously during this.
It's true.
Do you want any visuals?
I think I'll just sort of kind of wait. Right.
So I wasn't sure quite what I talked about. And my name is Carew-Reid, for those of us that don't know each other. Come down from Media Lab at the invitation of the group, I think primarily to talk about Brooklyn and what we're doing at the Media Lab at Brooklyn Law School here in the community. And Lloyd, Harold foreshadowed a little bit of it in the overview of the Cali talk later this week. But I think the focus that I really want to say one thing in 5 minutes. I want to talk about online collaboration and what we're trying to put together between our students and researchers in the Media Lab and Brooklyn Law School, and then through Brooklyn Law School to the rest of the community. It's different. What we're looking at really is different scales and how we can use the tools of the trade for the trade of civic hacking. So the tools are apps, their services, their development of web-based technologies, and what we've started with is hackathons, and basically enabling through legal hackers the capacity for people to join teams or just to field a team online. So if you go to onlinehackathon.com and .org, you'll see that there's, or soon you'll see, there's an online hackathon platform that is basically what we, it's our dog food project. It's what we actually use when we collaborate between law schools and technologists at Media Lab and other technology outfits. And it allows for team formation, a little bit of a collaborative workspace, and it really is completely open source and uses open interfaces for private services. So you put a hackathon in, chuck an open Hangout in, use GitHub repositories to house your content. So this is, let's say, in the small. In the large, what we're looking at doing now this summer, working with Kansas City, Missouri, for a first prototype would be mass-scale participation online. So civic self-governance includes population-wide engagement as well. For that, there's an algorithm that we're attempting to employ this summer that doesn't have a name yet quite. So this is only a mass-scale participatory architecture, and it allows for, in the first round, people to propose an idea, either through text or through Twitter, or if you happen to have a smartphone, you can go to the website and fill a form. And then those ideas are, in a second round, allocated out to statistically significant small teams and people who rate them. And then the third round, you can take the top few ideas and go to another question, like, what would we do next with this idea? So if the idea were a statute, it might be we ought to have a statute that limits liability for this or that tort feature. The next one may be, what would the causes of action be? The next thing might be, let's propose some language. What we're doing this summer is new regulatory paradigms for the sharing economy. So the first round would be, well, we have to decide if it might be something like, what needs regulation in the sharing economy? We'll get a bunch of things from that. We had office hours on Facebook yesterday with a few cities, how in Kansas City, Missouri, at things they started to see it. The next round might be what types of law or city ordinance would be appropriate to address the top issues. The next thing might be literally, or will be, fielding language, so the idea is by using rounds, we should be able to sequence mass-scale participation in a way that can allow for meaningful engagement and actually result in more actionable outcomes than when you have a crowdsource and say just an idea in one round. And I guess I'll end by saying part of the reason that I'm here is the best progress we've made on some of these ideas has been in New York. So literally the first time we tested the rounds idea was in Jonathan's classroom with 30 students, where in 5 minutes we created a legal article that then published in the law.mit.com. The first round was, what should the topic of the article be? The syntax was as the title of a blog post. but it's also the topic. The second round was, okay, now that we know it was an election fraud, legal reform that was happening after the CC or something. Then it's, okay, well, what should we squib about that article? What would the angle be? So there's only like 2 sentences, the abstract. And then we had like 3 minutes on that, and we allocated them around with a formula. People rated them, and at the end of 5 minutes, sure as heck, we had a very nice article title and a nice squib. Jonathan and I were the judges, and we said, yes, this is published worthy, and I published it 2 seconds later. So from 30 students to 300 to 3,000, 3 million, it's the same basic mechanism of scalable rounds and algorithmically allocated rating. So online collaboration, we ought to use it as much as we can for civic hacking. That's what I got.
Thanks. So I want to add one thing to that. The way I mentioned Gail Brewer and Ben Kalis as our not-so-secret public weapons, Dad's and his colleagues at the MIT lab have been sort of our secret weapon. We're standalone law school, as I mentioned. We are not technologists. When we started doing things like legal hacking, we were sort of frauds. We were lawyers who knew how to write. We were not lawyers who knew how to code. So we thought, why not have one of the world's preeminent technology schools without a law school program of its own? So they've been an invaluable resource for us, DASA in particular. And frankly, my ulterior motive, my public motive for bringing Dad down here is to make sure he and his colleagues at the MIT Media Lab can work with the rest of the law. Very nice. A real valuable resource for New York as well.
I can stay here as long as I have socks and underwear. I'll stay definitely.
As you can hear, lunch is arrived. We're going to take 45 minutes for lunch, and definitely feel free to please ask each other what you found interesting. And then we'll come back at 1 o'clock. We'll come back to kind of brainstorm what would be useful conversations to dive into together.
So what's the